G'day, Ben from Duck Plain Chicken here, with hopefully what is the final video in this series. It has been dragging on quite a bit more than I expected, and a lot of that has to do with issues with the decals I've had and so forth. But anyway, this episode is going to be about sort of the electronics and the final assembly. So I've sort of started off, I've removed the I had a bit of blue tack in with these LEDs on these girders up here, so I've taken that out. So this will of course sit on the top with these lights sort of coming down, so I've sort of done that bit. And the next bit I'm going to get into is the base. I think that's probably the best place to start. Okay, time for the electronics, and I'm going to start with the 4 lights in the missile bay. Now originally I was going to do this with fibre optics, but I've decided against it. I think it'll actually be easier to have 4 LEDs in place. So the LEDs I'm using are these 0603 warm white LEDs at 3 volts, and they are very small. And so what I'm going to do is basically try and attach them with UV resin so that they're directly pointing out the holes, which I think is going to be easier said than done. The UV resin I'm using is just this stuff, I get it from AliExpress. I believe it's similar stuff to what's used in 3D resin printers. Try and get the LED facing the right direction. Yep, it's really tight in there. So if we get a bit of blue tack. Gotcha. Okay, now it's in place. I can get the resin. I think the thing's turned. Not sure how effective that one's going to be. I reckon it's the hardest one. Alright, so what we have is the 2 LEDs on that side. And we can do the other ones. And then we can test how well it works, whether I need any light blocking, that sort of thing. Alright, so I've got them looked up. You can see they look pretty good. I'll turn off the overhead light and give it another shot. You can sort of see how it's going to work. So I think that should be alright. Now it's a matter of sort of trying to wrangle this mess. I'm not quite sure the best way of going about it, to tell you the truth, but I think I was going to do individual resistors for each LED, but I think I'll risk it and just use one. So basically hook them all up together with the one resistor. Works the same way. It's a bit more risky than doing it individually. You should, you know, put an LED, you should put a resistor on each LED, but I think in this case I'm quite happy to take the risk. So what I'll probably do is join all these up, yeah, and then solder on a resistor to them. So, alright, next step. Okay, I've cleaned up these wires, so all the reds are going to a single resistor, and I'll put some heat shrink over that. And then the blacks are all sort of, the negatives are all tied together. So I think we're good to go for that bit. Now I think what I might end up doing is using a what are called pin headers. So I might end up using these things, just because I'm going to have a whole series of lighting coming into the bottom, and I should say I've cut out a hole. I've got some white marks on that. Where's that coming from? I've got a hole there for the USB plug, USB socket, so that'll just poke in from the other side, and then I'll just epoxy it in place. I've also got a hole here for the switch, but there are going to be a number of wires coming from the rest of the kit, so I don't really want to be sort of soldering, you know, down near the plastic and everything like that, and it's going to get sort of awkward. So I think I might use some pin headers and some sockets, and so that way I can sort of have I can just set it all up and then plug everything in as I need to. I think that'll be the safest bet. Okay, so the positive and negative have all been wired up to header pins. So now when I create the sort of circuit that hooks up both the USB and the switch, I'll be able to just plug those in. Okay, I've made some progress here. From the USB socket, the positive goes to the switch, the other positive goes to this connector block, where any of the positives from any of the other lights can just be plugged straight into. And then from the negative on the USB socket, I've done pretty much the same thing. So what that means is if I get this roughly installed, so we have switch, USB socket, and then these header pins, so anything that's positive, like these ones here, plug in like that, and then the negatives can plug in like that. Now I don't want to test it at this stage just because if I put 5 volts through it, I'm likely to blow the LEDs because I haven't got all the rest in place with the resistors. But at least you get an idea, and the reason I wanted to go down this sort of path is because then I can get everything kind of plugged in and you know, squirreled away. I can get the switch and the USB socket glued in. I think I can probably do that now, and yeah, it just makes it a bit easier. Rather than doing soldering near the plastic, I can just plug things straight in. Now, of course, there will be a I need to drill a hole in the base, which I haven't done yet. I need to drill a hole because there'll be a whole lot of stuff coming from the back that'll need to poke through here. So I have to do that yet. But that's going to be the basics of the circuitry. Nothing fancy in there, no Arduinos or anything like that. It's just a basic LED circuit. Okay, time for me to stick this switch in place, and what I'll be using is this Premium Magic Putty, which is an epoxy putty, so it's a 2-part epoxy resin, and you got a working time of about 2 hours and a full cure time of 12 hours. So it's equal parts by volume, I guess. I'm going to start just dip my fingers in a bit of water just to make it a bit easier to mix this stuff up. I do really like this stuff. Once you get it sort of kneaded and in a working form, it's a lot easier to work with than some of the other 2-part epoxy putties I've used. Like, I tend to use the sort of stuff that plumbers use, but I tend to find that that can be sometimes a bit it's meant for bigger projects, you know. It's not as fine to work with as what this stuff is. So I'm giving it a really good mix here. The hardener and the resin, it's getting nice and soft, so give it a really good knead. And then sort of start putting it in place with this switch. Okay, we've got that switch in there now. I'm going to leave that for a good 24 hours, and I'll wait for that to cure before I put the USB socket in, so I'll do the USB socket next. Okay, I've just spent the last hour or so sort of trying to get this all sorted out. So I've glued the spotlights on, taken the masking off, now put in the flashing light with the fibre optic, and I've joined all these cables up, and the reason for that is because the wires that come on these LEDs are really quite thin, and I wanted something a little bit beefier because it's going to go sort of down the back of the hanger. So I want to sort of try and get all this stuff tucked up in here and then sort of glue it in place, or set it down even with a bit of blue tack just to sort of hold it there in place so it doesn't sort of move around. And these wires tend to break if they're bent too much. So anyway, let's have a look at what this looks like. I've got the flashing LED and the two spotlights on a separate circuit. And the reason for that is that the flashing LED interferes with the spotlights, but there's the spotlights. I'm actually pretty happy with those. They look alright. Definitely a lot better than just a flat bit of plastic. And then if we have a look at the flashing light, you sort of get an idea what that looks like. Of course, I'll cut that fibre optic off, at the base once I'm sort of all sorted. Now, just to sort of show you what happens if I hook them all up at the same time, and given that this is only 3 volts, I think the problem is I'm getting too much of a voltage drop. That flashing LED, so you can sort of see how the spotlights are now flashing in time with the flashing LED. I'm hoping that's fixed with the 5 volt, but either way I should be able to work it out and set it up independently. Alright, so the next step is to try and get all this stuff down in here. And I'm trying to think of the best way to sort of do it. It is pretty crazy in there, and I need enough room to be able to get the bits of acetate, the bits of clear styrene in that I've painted up as well. So anyway, I'm going to give it a shot. I'll probably do this off camera because I think it's going to be a lot of me sort of swearing and carrying on, just so that I can sort of try and get it all in place, so that the only thing that sort of pops out the back are these silicone covered wires. Don't underestimate the usefulness of blue tack. Look at that, I just stuffed all those wires down there. I've now got plenty of room to put in the windows. And the other good thing about using blue tack is that if anything does go wrong, it's a lot easier to remove than something like 2-part epoxy. So that's fine. And once it's sort of all held in place, we'll sort of curve over the back, and I'll have it sort of secured in place so it has some give to move up and down the line. But I reckon that's a winner. So the next step is to get these windows in. So you can see now the windows are glued in. It all looks reasonably tidy, and so that way you definitely don't see sort of anything on the inside like all this mess in here. But so next step will be to attach this to the rail that it goes on, put the lid on it and feed the wires out through the back. Before I do that, just to also show you, I have epoxy puttied the USB socket in, so it's all the switch is now well and truly set in place, which is good. And so I'm getting closer to everything just being plugged in, ready to go. Okay, it's time to do some assembly on the hanger. And just to quickly show, I've drilled a hole here. This is where the wires from the back wall will go into and then hook into these connectors here. So what I'm going to do is just hold these things down temporarily with some blue tack just so they don't flap around the breeze. And then we can look at getting the back on. So I've actually put the control box sort of in place. We've got the wires coming out the back here. There'll also be the wires that go for the lights that run on the girders. But the first step is to get this in place. So it just press fits there. You see how that looks. Now the doors, I think I'll leave them off for now. I'll put them in later. The next thing is to put these bits in place. And that's actually a pretty tight fit, so I don't think I actually need any glue in there. I think with the layers of paint that went on it, it sort of has stiffened up that connection. So that's good. And then we take the top girder piece, and this is where I'll need to feed the wires carefully through these top bits. Okay, now try and pull all this through. They're getting it too tangled. Want to be careful, this wire kinks really easy. Okay, closer and closer. That's all in place there. So I think ready to put a little bit of glue in there. Okay, so just a little bit of to me extra thin. Bit. The problem is it's not perfectly square, so I'm trying to get it sort of roughly even if I can. You're kind of getting an idea of how it looks. So the next thing is to try and wrangle all these wires. So I think what I'll end up doing is trying to reduce it down to minimum number of wires going through. So if I have, this one's going to fit in here. Yeah, so I think I've got the two pairs coming from the control box, and what I end up with is I'll sort of join all these up and I'll go with just one pair that will do the lights on the girders. So I'll do that off camera and then show you the result of that. I've joined up the wires at the top here for the girder lights, and I've just used some electrical tape to kind of tidy it all up. It's far from perfect, but given that it's on the back, I'm not really that fussed. So I now need to sort of feed all the wires through this hole here and wire up some resistors, and then I can plug them in, and we're on the home stretch to get this sort of all complete and tested. Okay, everything's all hooked up now. I let's see if I can show you what's happening underneath. It's all taped up. It looks pretty messy, but and I haven't actually tested it yet, so I'm not sure if it's actually going to work or not. I want to talk about the actual figures, because the figures do not stand on their own 2 feet. And so there's a couple of ways that you could go about making them stand on their own. I used super glue to stick them down to this container here, so to make it easier to paint. And what I'm going to try and do is just ease the figure off so that that super glue is still sort of makes a flat base for the character. I might have to get in there with a knife, I think, and try to gently persuade it to come off. Oh, there we go, not so gently. And now you can see if the figure actually stands. Let's see that. It's probably a bit hard to see from there, but the figure does actually stand on its own 2 feet. Whereas when I first cut them off the sprue, there was no way they were going to stand by themselves. So you do get a bit of a lump in the bottom, sort of in the feet section, but you know, it's not, to me, that it's not that much of an issue as long as it stands on the base on its own. The other thing that you could use is a little bit of white glue or PVA, you know, to stick it, so that if you ever needed to pull it up, you probably could. Or super glue. I wouldn't go using model cement because that'll make the paint run. But super glue or white glue would do the same thing. Now, I haven't worked out where I want the figures to be yet, so I'm not going to glue them to the base just yet. But once I sort of get it sorted, I think I'll probably end up just gluing it. The other thing that I haven't sort of covered is the finalisation of the Valkyrie. So I've given it a matte coat, and I'm pretty happy with the way it's come up. The custom decals have worked pretty well. The yellow on it is close to the painted yellow I used, but not spot on. But it's, you know, it is what it is. The figure itself, the Valkyrie, is not really proportioned correctly. You know, it's in no way sort of accurate to the Valkyrie from the show, but it still sort of is a reasonable representation. So you can see all the sort of custom decals I did, the skull and crossbones, and I also did some little decals underneath for the intakes to the side of the cockpit there. The last little touch I did on this was just used just a dab of enamel red, XF7, flat red by Tamiya, just for those little dots on the side of the legs. And so the next step, of course, is the beauty shots. But before I do, just a few thoughts on the kit. Firstly, I spent about 60 hours on this kit, so the work that I did, you know, it wasn't a quick process. It's the reason why it's ended up as 4 videos. I've probably gone overboard with the lighting on it and the modifications I made, but I gotta say I really enjoyed this kit. It was a lot of fun. It's an older kit, so you've got seams to deal with, you've got, you know, bad decals, that sort of thing, but I just absolutely love building this kit. Thoroughly enjoyed it. So yeah, just keep that in mind. The decals are a bit iffy. I don't know if it was just my box version where the decals just didn't come off the backing paper at all, but you know, you can still get this kit. I've seen it around on eBay. It's not as cheap as what it was when it was new, but it's still reasonably cheap. And you know, for a diorama in a box, it's pretty cool. And of course, you can just build it straight out of the box as it is, or you can go stupid like me and sort of light it up and go into sort of further detailing. So on that note, time for the beauty shots, and until the next build series, I'll catch you later.